Sega's most obscure video game ever. That's a hard one to justify because, let's face it, it could pretty much be any game of the Big Blue's long list of video games. It all depends on your definition of obscure. From faceless surfers to 60s inspired TV space reporters, dolphin abducting aliens, and possibly most obscure of all, that one that was based on Michael Jackson, Santa Claus and Bill Clinton. You know, Sonic. Basically what I'm trying to say is that this topic could basically become an entire series of its own. And who knows, perhaps I will revisit it one day. However, I feel like I may have found not only the most obscure game Sega have ever put out, but also the most political and the rarest game too. Yes, even rarer than Echo the Dolphin and Tetris for the Mega Drive. I'm Daniel Ibbertson, and this is Sega's most obscure video game ever. So let's get straight to it. Here it is, Bundy No I'm Sorry, released in arcades in 1985. Never heard of it? Well, you may know it by its English name and translation simply titled I'm Sorry. Although I would highly doubt that, because even though the translated ROM exists, nobody has ever found a cabinet for this game outside of Japan. In fact, when looking on the Arcade Museum database, there apparently only exists 3 members that claim to have a board of the game. And nobody has ever seen the English translated board or cabinet. There's no official arcade artwork, no official manual scans, no arcade promotional material, and not even a picture of the bloody game board that those 3 owners apparently have anywhere to be found online, which makes editing this episode quite hard. In other words, playing on the real hardware in this instance isn't exactly possible. So whilst we wait for Sega to put this game up on the Nintendo eShop, let's just boot it up via emulation, shall we? So, Bundy No I'm Sorry. What's it all about? And who the hell is this? Why, it's Kakaway Tanaka, of course. Yep, Sega published a game about the 40th Prime Minister of Japan. But what's weirder is that in 1985, when this game was released, Kakaway Tanaka wasn't the Prime Minister. In fact, he hadn't been the Prime Minister for over 10 years, which for Japan is quite a long time. In fact, there's been 5 Prime Ministers since then. What's that about? Why not make a game based on the 1985 current Prime Minister of Japan, one Yasuhiro Nakasone, who came into power on November 27th, 1982 until the 6th of November 1987. It's all very odd, even for Sega. Look, before we go ahead and look at the game, I think we need to look into exactly why this particular Prime Minister was chosen, as we take a brief Slopes Game Room style look at the history of Kakaway Tanaka. Kakaway Tanaka, born on the 4th of May 1918, served in the Imperial Japanese Army for 2 years from 1939 to 1941. After several successful business management ventures, he became a member of the Liberal Democratic Party in 1955, and in 1971 he gained the highest popularity rating of any new premier in Japanese history to become Japan's 40th Prime Minister. Now honestly, I'm probably the least politically educated person you will ever come across, but from what I can tell after reading several articles, he was actually a pretty well liked individual that did a decent amount in 2 years to help Japan, including, but most likely not limited to, an ambitious infrastructure plan for Japan connecting poorer secondary cities with increasingly vast populations to easily move about and build up Japan's worth as a whole, which resulted in such positive outcomes as national pension benefits and free medical care for the elderly, to name a few. Although it was the oil crisis of 1973 that did start to knock his popularity down a peg or two. But This wasn't why people didn't like him, and this isn't why Sega decided to publish this game, because shortly after all this, the history of Kakue Tanaka did take a turn for the worse. After he resigned in 1974, when on October 1976, it was discovered that he was one shady character during his time in office, as he accepted close to the equivalent of $2 million in bribes from aerospace company Lockheed to buy their planes for use in the national airlines. And with that in mind, you can see why the game was called I'm Sorry. Not only because sorry is the word we use when feeling regret, but sorry, as in SORI, is also the Japanese term for Prime Minister. See what they did there? Cheers for the help on that one, Jimmy Happer. Anyway, on top of this, the game, as previously mentioned, was released in 1985, which was only 2 years after the former Prime Minister was found guilty of his naughtiness. And now, it all makes a lot more sense. The whole game was made just to shame this guy. So, what is the game actually about? Well, you obviously play as everyone's not so favourite Prime Minister, Kakue Tanaka, and as you would expect, the aim of the game is to become as wealthy as possible by collecting all the gold bars on the screen and then depositing them back at your place, all whilst dodging those Men in Black looking officers. And boy, do you want to dodge them, because if you do get hit by one of these bad guys, you get very told off. After all, you have been a very bad boy. A very bad boy indeed. Yep, whoever decided to go ahead and make this game over at Coreland was so wound up by the former Prime Minister / leader of the free world, Kakue Tanaka, that when you get caught grabbing all the gold, you get stripped down to your undies and get whipped by a guy in a leather bikini. Anyway, moving on. Weirdly enough, professional hornies are not the least of your worries. Heck, you can punch those buggers in the face if you're quick enough, which, unfortunately, can't be said for the world's strongest barrel, and, fire hydrants. Anyway, Tanaka seems to have also wound up former Japanese professional wrestler Giant Baba, who throws you around if you get too close. Although you can actually defeat the 4-time PWF World Heavyweight Champion, 3-time NWA International Heavyweight Champion, and 3-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion if you punch him enough times. Not bad going for an old age politician. Weirdly though, on top of this, you also got a moonwalking Michael Jackson that grows fangs and gets all Thriller on your ass if he gets too close. And finally, you got Madonna. Or at least I think it's Madonna, it could be Marilyn Monroe, who knows. Whoever it is, she treats you better than an all-access card at the Kink Mansion. Poor old Kakue Tanaka, did he really deserve all this? Well, that's up for you guys to decide. Like I said, I'm not really a very political guy, and all I know is that this is actually a pretty decent game. It's got a great classic feel about it, it's quite short, trickier than Run DMC's best single, and get this, it actually has a pretty awesome soundtrack too. And weirdly, a sample of this tune was used by Spanish electro band Super Puta for the song Nintendo. Oh, and by the way, Super Puta sort of translates to, oh dear. So, there you have it. A game about a money-hungry Japanese Prime Minister from the 70s, released in the 80s, where you run away from Michael Jackson, Giant Baba and a whole host of horny individuals in an attempt to make yourself filthy rich, no matter what the cost. In my opinion, it's the most obscure Sega video game ever released. That is until I discover something new. After all, the early arcade days of Sega are littered with some of the best and weirdest games the company have ever put out. And best of all, most of them have never been looked at properly. So, there's plenty for the taking. And, not only do these games have pretty obscure references littered throughout, on the most part, they're actually brilliant fun to play, and Gonbi No I'm Sorry is no exception. Hey there guys, if you're watching this on My Slopes Game Room channel or Larry Bundy Jr.'s channel, I just want to say a big thanks for checking out the video. Don't forget to subscribe to both channels and check out other videos by clicking the links on the screen. But for now, this is DJ Slopes signing out, and hopefully I'll see you all next time.